Thanks, Nicole. Like Nicole said, welcome everybody to today's webinar, an introduction to cost-benefit analysis of conservation planning. My name is Robin Buckingham. I'm the Puyallup and White River Watershed farm planner with Pierce Conservation District, as well as a member of the Center for Technical Development. Thank you to the 40 or so folks who have joined us this morning. We hope this is a useful and informative webinar for you all. Our focus today is going to be on utilizing partial budgeting through tools such as T-charts to assess monetary as well as non-monetary costs and benefits of conservation. This type of analyses will provide clients with better understanding of the conservation options available to them and allow them to make more informed decisions. The NRCS provides templates and trainings on these tools through the Economics of Conservation Planning course, which was unfortunately canceled this year, as well as technical bulletins and on-the-job training. If you were sad to hear that Economics of Conservation Planning was canceled this year, note that it should be an Ag Learn module for planners to take sometime later this year. So presenting on today's topic is Carri Gaines. Carri is the Washington State Forester for the Natural Resources Conservation Service and has worked with the agency for over 15 years and in the forestry industry for over 40 years. She's the economics contact for Washington State and has graciously agreed to walk us through an introduction of some specific tools they have available. After Carri's presentation, Ryan Williams, who's the habitat coordinator with Mason Conservation District, will give an experienced planner's perspective on project cost estimation, as well as a few useful tools for those not utilizing NRCS payment rates or other established cost lists when planning. Carri, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for a few more words of introduction, and then you can take us away on today's topic.
Okay, Carri, let's get you off mute and see if we can, I can see your video, your screen looks good.
There you go.
There you go, perfect, thank you.
All right, so I'm Carri Gaines. I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm the economics contact for Washington's NRCS, and most of my time spent as the state staff forester. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my video cam, but please ask questions throughout. We'll answer them as they come through, okay? So let's get going. So I want to start out by giving Hal Gordon, NRCS regional economist out of Portland, Oregon. I want to give him credit. He helped me with this presentation to make sure we hit the high points. And yeah, he's a great economist, and we can get him out here every once in a while. And he usually leads the Economics of Conservation Planning trainings, okay? Let's see if we can get this to move forward. There we go. So let's look. Economics and conservation planning, you guys might use different terminology. Maybe you call it farm planning or ranch planning, forest planning. We're all working in natural resources. Our core product are these plans, which provides the roadmap to solve natural resource problems on private lands. This discussion will be about the importance of including economic considerations in our conservation planning process and providing you guys some tools for you to use within that planning process. Well, let's see if we can, there we go. So, consequently, from the standpoint of common sense, national action to conserve the soil resource must not only deal with soil erosion and related physical facts, but also cope with the complex economic and social considerations that affect the use of the land. So this was a quote from Hugh Hammett Bennett, and if if those of you who have been around NRCS for a while know that he is our founding father for NRCS, or back then the Soil Conservation Service. So from his point, you do planning on the ground, not in the office, and you consider the human considerations as well as the technical considerations out there on the ground. So a key component in a successful implementation of these voluntary conservation programs is providing your producers or your clients with plans that are economically achievable. Solutions to natural resource problems are most enduring. They're most likely to succeed when co-joined with economic, social, and financial assistance that meets the needs of the people managing those natural resources. So they're most likely to succeed if the landowner, the client, can afford to do the work we're asking them to do. And much of that belongs to them. But we can also see the problems as they're coming down the road at us during our interviews and our discussions with the clients. Unfortunately for us, and probably for you folks as well in the conservation district world, the number of economists that we have to call on to help support us is going down. But that doesn't mean we don't need to understand the economic realities that our clients face out there. So let's talk about the objectives for you folks in the field. You need to be familiar with the economic issues associated with implementing these voluntary conservation programs on private lands. We need to support the individual client and the communities in making informed natural resource decisions. We need to integrate discussions of cost effectiveness, benefit cost assessments, and other economic considerations into the conservation planning process, okay? We need to provide clients with conservation plans that are economically achievable. I'm probably going to say that a million times during this presentation. It's the point I'm trying to drive home. We can ask them to do a bunch of stuff or take on huge projects, but if they can't manage it, if they don't have what it takes to manage it, then it's never going to get done. So the success of our conservation efforts is based on maintenance and improvement of natural resources through locally directed voluntary programs, right? Success in this effort depends on providing farmers with state-of-the-art conservation technology that reduces costs, maintains productivity, reduces risks, and protects the environment. Field planners have a central role to play in making sure that conservation plans, farm plans, ranch plans are economical. And so I'm going to put in my 2 cents here. Adding the economics of conservation planning course to your training plan is essential. It can provide you a lot of great skills and understanding of your clients. And I took it quite a few years ago with Hal, and I'd tell you it's one of the better courses I've ever taken. Now that was an in-person to in-person course. We'll see how these new online courses work, okay? So let's get going here. Natural Resource Conservation Service and conservation districts are unique in our approach to conservation. We assist small working farmers, ranchers, forest landowners in managing natural resources on private lands. The product we're learning about today is to provide are farm plans which solve natural resource problems to provide those to the farmers in a way that the farmers are going to be able to move forward with them. So let's talk about the definition of economics. The allocation of scarce resources among competing uses. So what are some scarce resources? Give me some examples. And I know you're just doing it on your chat, but go ahead and give Robin and Nicole something to do out there. You guys, are they out there?
They are out there. They're putting a few responses forward.
All right.
So we've got, do you want me to list off some of these for you, Carri?
Yeah, give me the first 3 or 4.
Okay, we've got things such as money, time, phosphorus, native vegetation, food, clean water, clean air, funding, producer time, water quality, water quantity, time again. Yeah.
Okay, we're seeing time, right? A lot. So what are some of the competing uses for those same things? Let's take time. I mean, that's the big thing, right? There's a bunch of competing uses for a farmer, rancher, forest landowner's time. So the economics is taking a look at that time allocation, right? If it's water quality or water in general, what are the competing uses for that water? Is it for the crops, the livestock? Maybe it's for the homestead. You know, there are a lot of competing demands on all the natural resources out there. So what is a field planner's economic responsibilities? So investment or costs of conservation, the local estimated cost of the practice, and if the practice is eligible for financial assistance, and what is our reimbursement rate, right? So provide practice cost payment information to the client. And we gotta help them understand what they think the cost of doing that project is, or the cost of doing that practice, and what kind of financial assistance they can get for that. Benefits can occur in the future, or benefits can be immediate. Things like for future, the benefit of growing trees. So you thin, trees grow bigger, but that is down the line, right? So we need to account for the cost now and the benefits in the future. Just because an alternative is economical doesn't mean a producer will have the means to install the practice. We're going to make limited economic evaluations. Whether they can afford it or not, that's really up to them. We don't generally ask them that kind of information. You know, they either volunteer to give us some information, or we just tell them, do the economic evaluation, kind of lay out the data for them, okay? So economic includes their ability to make capital investments, including removing land in and out of production, providing skills, labor to install a practice, and management skills to keep the practice functioning over time. So if our clients don't volunteer, and I'm going to say this again, if our clients don't volunteer personal financial information, we're not asking them. We're just laying out the facts for them. So let's talk about the difference between financial analysis and economic analysis, okay? Is it profitable? Compare the benefits of the practice being installed and the costs of the project over time, over the life of the project, okay? The financial analysis, is it affordable, right? Compare benefits and costs over the period of the loan. So those are different things. we're going to do the economic analysis. So economic analysis compares these benefits and costs of an alternative over the alternative's lifetime. So address economic concerns where possible, consider the client's economic financial feasibility when developing the plan. You'll get a feel for that as well. Do not require to know the client's financial condition. And as you can tell, I'm saying that over and over again, but I want to really drive that point home. And you want to meet the land user and program goals both. So meeting the land user's objectives and goals for their land, so the client's objectives and goals for their land, and the program goals. So this is where those two things meet. That's where we want to look at our economic analysis. So let's talk about the human element in natural resources, right? This part is the technical, the SWAPA, the water, the soil, the water, the animals, the plants, the air, and now the human, right? So the first five is the SWAPA that NRCS talks about all the time, the technical things, the natural resources. But the human consideration, sometimes that's a little harder to deal with. And we've also added energy to that discussion. Human considerations, infrastructure, how we do our work out in the field, what kind of equipment we use, and how that equipment can save energy or be energy wasters. All of those things are things that we're looking at now. So why do folks own farms, ranches, and forest land? So in most of the surveys that I've read, it's a lifestyle. They don't think as farming as their occupation so much as their way of life. They do understand that it's a business and they need income. Real estate market can be a real pressure. Places where they've farmed for generations are now getting a lot of pressure on making them housing developments, and changing real estate market can be a real problem for the folks out there. So now I'm a forester. The National Woodland Survey came out a few years back, and there were 3 reasons for folks to own forest land. The top 3 reasons were having their home there, that's part of their lifestyle, having their home, having privacy, and the beauty of living in the forest. So land users want to utilize their natural resources, so they bring them to the most benefits. So it brings them to the most benefits to meet their goals and objectives. So they want to be able to use their land to the fullest to meet their goals, their objectives, their lifestyles. Okay. So let's talk about some economic tools to evaluate conservation alternatives. The need for conservation planning is based on the notion that something is currently or is expected to be at a condition that is less than desirable. And we're trying to improve that for the natural resource, okay? So we need to do an inventory. We get a benchmark condition out there. That's true for economics as well, right? We measure how successful we are by comparing the current benchmark condition to to the future with conservation condition of the resource improved and identifying the conservation impact, right? Okay, so we take what we have now in our inventory, we compare it to what we want it to be in the future. The decision maker will use their own values to decide the impacts, whether they're good or bad in regards to their meeting their own goals and objectives, okay? The T chart that we're going to look at, okay? So the impacts, their goals and objectives, how is this from the benchmark to the treatment going to affect them? So the T chart is the tool that we use to help us get there, okay? That was a little awkward, but it's still the point. Inventory, future condition, what are the impacts of getting there, and the decision maker's values will help us move forward, okay? So economic effects. So for us at NRCS, we have what we call the CPA 52, which is our environmental evaluation. And we need to look at very specific items. But those items are actually excellent place to start for your economic evaluation. You need to know your local farm environment. What are the major agricultural commodities or forest commodities? Where are they sold? What are typical yields and prices for those commodities? Now, farming, it's a yearly thing. For forestry, it could be 35 years, 40 years, 50 years down the line. Longer here in Eastern Washington. So you need to start understanding the clients that you're working with, what kind of market pressures they're dealing with out there. What are the local, state, and federal regulations? What affect most farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners? So for forestry, we have the forest practices rules and regulations. You have Department of Ag and Department of Ecology that farmers and ranchers end up working with. So by having a basic understanding of agriculture, ranching, forestry business in your area, you will be able to develop better plans by helping the client with economic analysis and give them a good start on their financial analysis. You know, we start with the big picture, they'll get into the weeds. So, the economic effects. We got Mr. Scrooge there. Land. Is land going to be pulled out of production? Are you taking land and putting it back into production? Capital. Is there going to be a need to buy some big piece of equipment? Like, are they going to have to shift to a no-till drill? Something big, some kind of big capital investment. Labor. Who's going to do the work? Is it going to be them? Is it going to be a contractor? Do they have a worker that they use? What are their capabilities? Are they going to have to expand their labor force, or can they do it with who they have right now? Management. Do they have the skills and the understanding and the knowledge to be able to manage the practice once it's in place? Not only manage its implementation, getting it installed, but then for the life of the practice, do they have those skills? Do we need to provide them some information? Risk. Are we increasing their risk, decreasing their risk, and profitability? So most of what we do, most of the practices, most of the work that we do with clients generally improve their profitability. It's kind of a win-win, and that's how we sell conservation programs, right? On these win-wins. So when we're doing an economic analysis, what changes? Instead of looking at all the farm, all that's there, it's much easier to just look at what we're changing in our analysis, okay? And we use a T-chart for that and a partial budgeting concept. Partial budgeting is a tool that systematically displays the benefits and costs of an alternative. Only the benefits and costs that are changed are considered, okay? It compares benefit and cost to determine if there is a change in net farm income or non-income benefits. It will simplify, by doing this partial budgeting and not having to look at the entire farm, it really simplifies the data collection. For example, you could look at the costs of installing the practice versus the beneficial effects of that practice, and then gathering information, rather than gathering information on the whole farm or the entire enterprise, just where the practice is installed. You're just gathering data right there. So the T-chart is a simple way to display the partial budgeting effects and providing information to the farmer, rancher, or forest landowner. Okay, so this is basically what the T-chart looks like. There are 3 levels that you can use in a T-chart. Level 1 is you put in qualitative statements about the benefits and costs of doing the project or doing the work you're thinking about doing, or they're thinking about doing, I should say. So you just kind of lay it out for them. Level 2 is you start adding some metrics, some units of measure, some installation costs. And level 3, you can do even further economic analysis and financial analysis. Now, I tend to leave level 3 to the landowner or the client and let them expand that analysis. They're the ones that are making the investment. They're the ones that are taking the risk with us. So I just tend to get to level 2, lay out the data for them, and then let them take it the next step. The planner only develops enough information for the client to make an informed decision. So as you're doing this, you just need to give them enough information that they can go off, work it out on their own, and make that informed decision. And it's important that if we get too detailed, the farmer or rancher may lose interest if too much or irrelevant information is provided. Okay? The T-chart can be developed on a scrap of paper or on these formal charts, or whatever the decision maker is comfortable with. You know, this is just a tool for you guys to use if it's helpful to you. Okay, so level 1, let's do it again. Level 1 is qualitative statements. Level 2, you add units of measurement, you add costs that we know about, financial assistance that we know about. Okay, level 3 is the economic, a little deeper economic and financial analysis. So let's take a stab at this. So we have the Rock and Raindrop Ranch, and they have a pasture. In pasture 1, they want to do a seeding, brush treatment, and some weed control. Okay, we start out, some positive effects: forage quality improvement, reduced erosion, water quality improvement, goose habitat and improvement, and bird watching, increased forage. Those are the things that the positive parts that the landowner can see would happen if he did some pasture seeding, got rid of some of the brush, and did some weed control. So the goose habitat could also cause some trespass. They got to pay for brush control, they got to pay for reseeding, and then that weed control, that goes on every year. So we can start adding some additional data. We know that 50% increase in desired forage species, you're going to get fatter cows. You could reduce erosion by 2 tons per acre. You know, if the cows had really beat up that pasture, maybe you're getting some erosion off of it. Water quality improvements. Harder to put a dollar value, but if it's not eroding off into the creek, you're going to improve your water quality there. Goose habitat improves bird watching. That's more of a personal value. And then forage increases. The more if they can get more forage, at least 3 animal unit months per year, times $12 per animal unit month, they can increase their bottom line by $36 per acre per year. So on the brush control, they know that they're going to have to spend about $50 for the acre after cost share, say, as part of the site prep to reseed. They also know that the reseeding cost is going to be around $65 an acre. So their total cost to install this practice right up front is going to be about $15 an acre. So the weed control then is something they're going to have to do every year, and it's going to be at least $15 per acre per year. Okay? In your conversation with them, you can establish a lot of these dollars. If you want to go to the next step and help them start their economic analysis, you can do a little bit of that. So there's always a cost to money, right? So if you're going to amortize the cost of installation over the 10 years of that pasture life, at 7% interest for 10 years, you have a factor here, and I'm going to tell you where to find that factor. You're going to have a factor of 0.142 times $115. That means it's going to cost about $16.33 a year per acre. Okay, so the annual installation cost is $16.33. The weed control every year is $15. That's a total of $31.33 per acre per year. You compare those two items, you know that you're making about $4.66. About $4.66 per year more if you do your pasture seeding. So that tends to take it a little further than I normally would take it out in the field, but some of you might feel comfortable doing that, especially if you really know the economics of your area. So here, this is a table we have, an amortization table that we have on our economics page in the national website, the National Economics website. Okay, you can go into that website and we can do a demonstration on how to get there. And here's the 7% interest rate. And for 10 years, that's where they got the 1.42. There's also a really good technical note in there that helps you understand these T-charts a little better and helps you move through the process a little easier, okay? We also have these conservation effects that are built for almost all the practices. And as I can see, that keeps changing back to purple. This is instead of white, and I apologize for that. I don't know why it keeps changing back. But at any rate, you can pull these out. They help you start the process of doing the T-chart, gives you some qualitative statements that you can grab from and put into your T-chart. and you can do it on a practice by practice basis and then put all of them together. And here's the website, a quick way to get to these conservation practice effects documents. And these guys are pretty easy to use. They're built the same way for all the practices. They have SWAPA on the left talking about how this particular practice will affect each of the resource concerns. Sometimes a practice won't affect one of the resource concerns at all, and it really expands on the human part of it. Then on the right side, you have the main economic categories that we review. You have the land, the capital, the labor, the management, and the risk. And in the end, the net effect, that's the discussion about profitability. Okay, so let's look at a forestry example. I'm going to escape out of here. So hopefully everybody can see that. This is for tree and shrub site prep. And I chose this one because I've spent the last couple weeks talking to people on why their plantations fail. And often it fails because they didn't put any effort or time into site preparation. So say we have a small planting, we take a look at this, and I went through and I dropped out the items that definitely aren't of interest on the particular project that you're working on, so you can delete them. I just shaded them out here. I wanted to talk to them about the different items that are important and why they should do site prep before they plant, okay? So let's go on to my next page. So I went into these after I got rid of the items that I didn't think applied to the site, and I looked at them and I talked about, okay, if you're going to disturb the soil, and this is mechanical disturbance, but even if you do spot treatments like larger scalps, you increase. There's plenty of research out there that talks about how you can increase your average survival. And if you can increase it by 20%, that's 80 trees. At the cost of the tree and the tree planting, that could be $120 that of your investment, of the client's investment that they saved by doing site prep alone. Now, on the ones I've been looking at, they were having like 60 or 80% mortality, partly due to dry conditions, but mostly due to the fact that they had, you know, a 6-inch scalp and just put the tree in the ground, and all the grass or all the vegetation around it was sucking up the water, and the little tree never got established. So talking about the investment that they put into the into planting trees, why not save yourself some money and do a decent site prep? Talk about creating a 3-foot scalp and using that also to reduce the competing vegetation around a growing space, increasing the growing space. We talked about buying a hoe. You're going to have to make an investment. Well, if you're doing a scalp, your investment's a hoe, it's about $40. So over 400 spots, if you have just an acre of work to do, that's 10 cents a spot, okay? We talked about labor. Now, if they're going to pay someone to do it, then they got 400 spots, and say this person isn't used to doing that kind of work, so they can only do 30 spots an hour. That's 13 hours to get the site prep done. Times $15 an hour, that's $200 an acre, plus the hoe, your whole investment's $240 for that acre. If you get cost share, if we went all the way down here under the human part of it, you'd notice that cost share was about $210. We could offer them $210 an acre in cost share. Okay, so $210, it's basically your whole investment. If you get cost share on that treatment, would be about $30 an acre. Now, if you're doing it all yourself, you can give them this one. $210 is your cost share. It's going to take you 13.3 hours, more or less, maybe less if you can go faster. That's about $15 an hour you're getting paid to do this work. And you add the $2.50 for the 30 spots that you do per hour for the cost of the hoe. That's $13.39 an hour that you're putting in your pocket. So it's really discussing, kind of start out by putting your metrics in there, and then you can really go to the dollar part. And then once you get that done with site prep, then you would add your information for tree planting. You can tell how tree planting and the site prep can work together really well. And you can also add information on your post-plant veg control. You can then just put it all together using these kinds of conservation effects documents. They're really a decent starting place. So let's get back to our example. So economics data. Only use economic data that is useful to the farmer and the rancher. You know, if you get too much extraneous stuff in there, they tend to lose interest, get confused. Just keep it simple and keep it direct to whatever they're doing. It is more important to know where to get the data than to have the data right then and there. And you can help the farmer, rancher, forest landowner with places where they can get the data. Economic data is only good for today, right? It is a changing landscape out there. Anybody who has been watching their retirement account knows that's about as true as it gets. It changes day by day. Markets change, the price of lumber changes, the price of hay changes, everything changes day by day. So work with your landowners, know and understand them, have them also talk to their neighbors for this kind of information. That's a good source of economic data, is your landowners. The Field Office Tech Guide, we have a NRCS economic website that you can get some of this data from. Our payment schedules, that helps you understand what kind of financial assistance is available for your clients out there. We have a state, not a state economist, I'm the economics contact. Most of the time I will be going to the region to get you whatever information you want. Maybe you want a case study done. If you go through me, I can get the regional economist to help us with it. And we've done a couple of those in the state. One is had to do with some small buffers, using hedgerows to make buffers along streams that are now acting as ditches and reducing water temperature. So we can do those kinds of case studies on the cost of doing that kind of practice in particular landscapes. Okay. Crop, livestock budgets, you can get those from University and Extension Services. You can also, Richard Fleener is our grazing land specialist. We don't have an agronomist right now, state agronomist. We're trying to get that on our list of positions to rehire. So right now we're a little low on that, but we do have some area agronomists that could be helpful to you folks out there. The Washington DNR, I get a lot of information from them. They collect costs. They even publish some costs out there. So if it's forestry, I work with them a lot. And you can also look at other agencies, other conservation partners for this kind of economic data. So again, my name's Carri Gaines. I'm the economic contact for NRCS in this state, and I'm also the state staff forester. So please, if I can be helpful, give me a call, and if I don't know the answer, I'll probably know where I can get it. So, any questions?
Just
Thank
a
you.
reminder.
Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to say, just a reminder for folks before Robin comes in here, just please type those questions into the questions box, or if you raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask your question direct. So I'll turn it back over to you, Robin.
Sure. I think we had a couple questions in the chat box about the links to the resources and materials in your slides, Carri. So we will be sure to get those posted up with this video on the CTD website.
Now, do you want me to do a quick demonstration on where to find it right now?
Sure, why not? While folks are thinking about questions for you, that's probably a good use of time.
Okay, let's see if we can get out. You guys don't want to look at me. You want to see the website. So let's go back to that. Let's escape. Maybe. I think Robin has the helm, maybe, because it's, oh, there we are. And let me escape, finally. So let's go. So for economic information, we're going to go to the national NRCS website. All right. And of course, everything's going to slow down now. We're going to go to topics. See that? Resource, technical resources. And because I'm out actually at a field office, it's going to be a little bit slow. We're going to go to the economics page. Okay. And as you can see that over the last couple of days, I've been looking up all sorts of stuff to hopefully give you a decent presentation here. And here's the tools. And here's some of the tools that you can use on this. Now, I use this, the T-chart, payment schedules, and down here is that amortization card that I was showing you as part of the presentation, and just a lot of different tools and information that you can use to help fortify whatever economic discussion that you want to have with your landowner. And it's based, look, crop and hay, irrigation, energy, forest, my love, forest right there. So that's pretty much it. Is that helpful? And I can send those links to you guys if you'd like.
That would be great, Carri, yeah.
So what else can we talk about?
Not seeing too much more in the question box besides, more just links to the resources and things that you have covered. Encourage folks to put any questions they have in there in the next couple minutes, or we'll transition over to Ryan's presentation. Oh, we got a couple coming in now.
Okay.
This one may be specific, but maybe you can have an idea about where to direct it. Somebody asks, can you discuss putting a value on reducing risk for shoreline erosion?
Putting a value. Well, as we discussed during the presentation, sometimes it's a qualitative statement, but I'd say a risk in shoreline type issues is also a regulatory issue. So the cost of dealing with regulation is a very real cost. So you might look at it from that perspective. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and I think maybe another way would be, just the alternatives of building a bulkhead and all the material and construction that would require versus soft shore armoring, and yeah. So I think there's a variety of different ways you could maybe put a value to some of those costs.
Most definitely, and you can in our cost list, we probably even have some of those at least government cost per unit, our government estimate of cost per unit. Now, as conservation districts, do you keep kind of an government estimate of different types of practices or activities?
We do for some activities and some materials, but how comprehensive it is, I don't know that it would fit in this situation.
Well, our payment schedules for all of our different practices will have a cost per unit that would be available as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got another question coming in here about some of the specific monetary estimates you were using in either the pasture example or the forest example. I'm not sure. But the question is, how are we getting those solid numbers?
So I used on the forestry example, I used like how many I can do per acre, like how many big scalps I could do per acre in my youth, and how many I could probably do at age 61, right? That's going to be different. So if you as a planner know that you can do something 50 times in an hour, your landowner may not be used to doing that and may not, how can I put it, be in the same shape you are. So you take your estimate of what you can do and you can draw it down. But the real dollars, like some of the dollars I got, came out of our government estimates and our cost share dollars. And that's where I normally start with NRCS and NRCS type projects. I would also encourage you that if you know the cost of something out there, it might be different than what we estimate at NRCS. And the longer you're in an area, the more likely you understand the cost of getting something done. So I know for forestry, that's my best example I can give you. I know that out on the coast, I can get a cheaper price for thinning out closer to the coast because it's going to stay open all summer long, right? Whereas inland, it costs more because half the summer they're shut down because of fire. So, and I also know in Western Washington, I have lots of contractors right there out of Chehalis. Here in Eastern Washington, we don't have as many contractors, so the price goes up. So I know I can get thinning done for less than $200 in Western Washington, out on the coast, and this is a couple years old. And over here in Eastern Washington, I know it's going to cost me between $300 and $400. So you can make estimates like that. And I would be talking to the landowner. What do you think you can get your thinning done? Have you talked to anybody? What do you think the prices will be? And they might already know, and they might throw out a number, like a real general number, a ballpark number. And that's really what you're doing here, is a ballpark number. They have to do the work. They have to talk to the contractors. They have to get the bids. They have to understand what the real cost is going to be for them. This is just a discussion that you're having about approximately how much things cost. Did we cover it?
I think that's great. And I think you talked about that earlier in your presentation about maybe that, exact cost or question being more of a level 3 analysis in the way that it's set up, and you let the landowner take it that far if it's that meaningful to them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that is all that we've got in the chat box.
Okay, now do I stay on for a discussion later?
I think that's all we had lined up for you, Carrie. You're welcome to stay on and watch Ryan's presentation and field any questions that may come up, or if there are any others that are directed to you, I can follow up with you afterwards.
I'll stay on and see what I can learn from Ryan as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, I think I will let Ryan Williams take control here and lead a little discussion on cost estimation from a CD perspective when you're not using maybe NRCS payment rates or other cost lists. So Ryan, take it away.
Howdy. So can you guys see my screen? It's got an equip cost component up there.
I can see it, yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, I'm Ryan Williams with Mason Conservation District. My work is really focused on riparian and in-stream habitat projects. So I have a real more targeted, I guess, maybe more like Carrie does as well, targeted on certain aspects. And we also tend to take things to a little bit deeper level of analysis, because sometimes we're actually going to be the person seeking contractors, and so it's important for us to have a really good understanding of what it's going to cost. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the resources I use to look up costs and to do some estimation. And as Carrie said, our estimations are just that, estimations, a good ballpark. Sometimes you get surprised on contractor quotes or bids, but it's always good when you're talking about trying to find funding or look at the cost benefit of a project. So really the first thing I want to show you is this WSDOT, Wash Department of Transportation they keep a record of all their past bids they've received for different elements. And so this page has, it's got basically lets you do a date range. It lets you sort by area. So on the right side, you can see you can go statewide. You can go very specific areas according to how they orient the state. They have all their different regions. But it lets you go in and it'll give you examples of bids that were received from contractors on their projects. So they order it by they have various definitions of their contractor side of things. I usually just kind of hit all selections because you don't know necessarily, not too familiar with what they call things all the time. But you can just basically generate a report that spits out, okay, the last 2 years, what were the bids that were received on things like, so we're in here, I saw like relocating a farm gate, that kind of work, soil decompaction. You can see they're looking at, $10 a, I think that's square yard. So you can go through here and you can try to find something that looks close and look at it, looks like they only received 2 bids, but they had a couple range. So, you do the high one, the low one, you can kind of think about that. If you organize it by your location, you can also see that, where it might be more local costs, kind of that difference between, are there a lot of contractors? Are the seasons different? That kind of thing that Carrie was discussing. So that's one thing. I just kind of use it either to give me a baseline or look at where the world is, at least in terms of public contractors. The thing to remember about this is going to be prevailing wage. It's going to be the more expensive side. So if you're working with a private landowner who's just going to hire it themselves, they're going to be able to get a cheaper deal on everything. And so, you have landowners who go, oh yeah, I know a guy, he's my buddy and he'll do it for this much cheaper. And, and so that's factoring that into your process is important. As part of that, we were talking about equip and so on. And I use that as a tool as well. They published every current year's payment rates for all the different practices, including with the subcomponents in there. The thing to remember with this one is that this is a cost share rate. It's not necessarily 100%. And so looking into figuring out, what rate are they, what percentage is it really expected to cover for brush management or that kind of thing. So that's an important component to remember, that this is actually going to be low probably. And then it's also averaged, I think, across the whole state. So it factors in things like the cheaper contractor on the west side might bring the east side estimates down. And then the last tool, the tool I'm going to want to show that I've made myself. So I think it's important, things to think about with your work is how, is there things that you can do to make things easier on you? And so when I do riparian plantings, it's pretty predictable in terms of I know my plant list. I know I have components that I'm going to be focusing on. And so I've created this Excel spreadsheet that helps me do a couple different things. It's pretty complicated and it's been growing over the years with input from various folks. I started this when I was at Snohomish CD with help from folks there, and then I've morphed it more once I've gotten to Mason CD. But it does a few different things for me personally. It allows me to do my plant planning, so my planting plan itself. So I'll have different management units and put in how much of what species I want, and it kind of summarizes it. And then it gets in here and you can start looking at costs. And so I've looked out in the world and looked at, gone to different nurseries in the area and gotten some average prices for different sizes. It's going to vary by species. But again, we're trying to get a ballpark. So getting, when you're doing a bare root, Douglas fir, it's not $1.50 a plant. It's more like, 45 cents a plant. But then when you're talking about like a Nooka Rose or a Twinberry or something, it might be closer to that $1.50. So it's really looking at a ballpark and hoping that, looking at averaging things out. And then, so basically this tool really, it just lets me do some of that math. I can like select what size and it'll spit out, a cost, but the formulas are missing. There we go, better one. That'll let me kind of spit out, give me the ability to start building a spec for what I'm looking for. And so, for example, a 6-foot live stake is going to be a different cost than a 3-foot live stake, and so I have that really built into this tool. And then when I do CREP planning, I also have that tool that these rates are all set in stone, and so I'll work on so this component kind of goes away and it becomes that what those rates are. The stuff that's really been, depends on what crews you have in the area. In the case of my case, we have an internal crew. And so I can start thinking about what are the production rates and kind of that conversation of can you install 50 of something in an hour versus 20. And I've been trying to do, come up with ways to somewhat automate the process, or at least give me the consistent ability to produce cost on something without having to, start from scratch every time. So I think, my recommendation is really when you're looking at doing, when you're starting, when you're starting to do things that are kind of similar. So say you're doing heavy use areas, trying to cost estimate those. You can start to get to a feel. You can call around to like, you know, gravel pits or whatever to get some basic costs out of things. And then you can really start scaling it based on designs. If you want to go into a lot of detail for the landowner, the other option is to go to the list and, and really figure out if it's 50% or 75% of or whatever the rate is. For a compost facility, you could use this as a basis for your estimate, but these are really come down to these are they're going to be paid out of NRCS cost share programs and not necessarily what it will actually cost. Other than that, if I have something new, I'll start here, and then I might, look into start going like just doing online searching, at least initially, calling around to local suppliers who will have maybe different pricing. So just trying to think of the elements you can, and then always adding in a factor of contingency, basically saying that you don't know whether you're going to hit if you start digging, or if you have issues with supplies, like they don't have the right posts or locally or something like that. So hopefully, this helps a little bit for you guys. I think if you give, I think I'm happy to answer questions or provide advice if folks would find that useful. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. I'm wondering for your, while folks are maybe entering questions into the chat box. Oh, actually, we do have one. I'll get to that one first. When it comes to heavy use areas and sacrifice areas, there are commercial companies that can provide estimates. I guess more of a comment there from Snohomish CD on some other resources for finding costs on specific practices.
Yeah, and if you have contractors that do that work in your area, that's definitely the kind of a place to go, because those are going to be what the bids will end up being. Our area doesn't really have these contractors, so we have to do a lot of the work ourselves. So, it just depends on what your industry looks like in your area.
And I will say something that we've done down at Pierce Conservation District is just keep a running tally of those projects that we've done in the past and use that to average out expected costs for projects coming up, either on a square foot basis or some other unit, recognizing that the farther you go back and past, the less useful those numbers are going to be. The question I had for you, the value that you use, I don't think you mentioned it, or is it kind of a feeling based on the risk level of the project? What do you end up using mostly?
So for my contingency kind of thing. Yeah,
sorry, my audio just got out there.
So yeah, for contingency, really depends on what the size of something you're trying to do. So say you have your heavy use area, maybe it's 10 or 15%, but if you're doing a big construction project, it might be as high as a 30%. Or just your uncertainty of what you're going to find once you start digging. So, a contained area that you're really not gonna, it's something they're just digging out an existing paddock that they need to upgrade. They're probably not going to find, they might find some chunks of concrete or something, but you're not going to hit something crazy. Then I wouldn't go too overboard on it. It really comes down to your confidence and your price estimates, and then what the risk is so what happens if the project goes over budget to the landowner, right? How much does that potentially affect them, their position or whatever, their financial position? So, is it a $10,000 project, and if it's a couple $100 over, is that catastrophic or not. I think that's part of the question. So, you know, so I'll try to estimate a little high so that the landowners can try to realize savings and realize that they're not, so they're not as surprised as you know, they're not surprised if it goes way over budget and all of a sudden they're banking on it costing a lot less.
That's great. Awesome. Got another question in the chat box, which may change depending on the type of practice you're talking about, but do you find the costs varying that much seasonally? Is there a factor that you can use to account for this? Or check sources for
So I lost the second half of the question, but I'm guessing
just cost changes based on season for projects.
Yeah, so cost changes, I think, you know, and so my experience at least is really around, you know, construction kind of things, big construction projects, and it really, some of it depends on like the state of funding out there. The amount of projects in your area can really affect your price. So if say a contractor is hurting for work, they're looking for work, they will bid low because they want the job to keep busy, keep the income coming in. But if they're flush, they're fine, they're going to bid high just to, you know, yeah, we'll do it if you pay me enough. And it's hard to know that's happening until you actually start getting bids in or quotes, unless you kind of keep an awareness of what's going on out there, or say you're doing a whole bunch of these projects yourself, you know, as a district, you've got 15 projects in the hopper, and you know you have 3 contractors that do this work pretty regularly. You may find you're struggling, or you may have a higher cost that year versus the following year. Those same three contractors may not have a bunch of jobs. So it's interesting. It's hard to really gauge. I know I've got some projects coming up next year that I'm concerned about price-wise, just because I know there's a bunch of these projects going on in our area, and there's going to be limited contractors. So we're, you know, we'll see how we go. And so the other component is getting out early. So if you're going to build something in the summer, contacting the contractor early, you know, having the landowner do it, or you, or whoever's kind of running the contract, is if you call them in June looking for a July construction, they're going to be higher cost than if you call them in February, to say, hey, well, we're not going to build it until June, and so they can build out their schedule. They like that predictability, I think. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things that factor into prices on dealing with contractors specifically.
That's great. Thanks, Ryan. Not seeing any other questions in the comment box right now. Give folks just another minute or two if they've got any thoughts. Otherwise, I want to thank both you and Carrie for great presentations today. And then maybe Nicole, since it doesn't look like we have much in the way of additional questions coming in, can we talk a little bit about where this will be posted if folks want to come back and refresh their memory or see any of the resources that were mentioned here?
You bet. Yeah, thank you everybody once again for attending today. Thank you very much, Robin, for moderating and putting this together. Greatly appreciated. So yeah, folks, I'm just going to give you a really quick tutorial view on where you can find this information. Give me 1 second here. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen here. I've got up the CTD webpage. This is our home page. If you go to the training tab and you go under events, number one, you'll be able to see, we should have hopefully posted up here soon all the presentations from Wade, but when you scroll down, go to webinars and web training, and you'll be able to see the webinar title from today. And after this presentation is done, you'll see a recording of the webinar, presentations of slides, and I'm also going to include the links that were shared today. So you'll be able to see those up here soon as well. So this is where you'll be able to see that recording of the webinar, share it with others, review it again, and or find all the resources that were discussed today. So just give me a day or so, and those should all be listed up. And with that, once again, thank you, Carrie and Ryan, for both attending today and presenting some great information. Thank you, Robin, so much for creating this and moderating it. And thank you to all our attendees for coming today and sharing this information. If you want to hear any other webinars, please don't hesitate to contact CTD. We're always willing and interested in hearing about what you want to see, any other information. You can see up there both our website and info@wactd.org, which would be the best contact to give us any feedback that you've got. So once again, thank you everybody, and we'll see you at our next webinar. Stay tuned for what that will be. You can check in on the webpage I just showed you on the CTD under training for our upcoming webinar schedule. Thank you so much.